March's first Thursday finds us in the middle of Lent, and my offering comes from poems and On Giving My Word, a poem named One Winter. This poem consists of meditations and interludes which attempts to imagine Jesus' own preparation for his passion. The setting for his Lent is provided by a terse verse in the Gospel of John, easily overlooked but quite rich with meaning. Directly following the account of Jesus' hasty visit to the house of Bethany, in which he calls his friend Lazarus to come out of the tomb, it is noted that Jesus therefore no longer walked among the Jews, but went from there to a town called Ephraim in the region of the wilderness. John 11:54. In fact, Jesus hadn't walked among the Jews since the attempt on his life in December that had taken place in the temple. He had retreated with his disciples to the Jordan River Valley and had gone back to Bethany, which neighbors Jerusalem, against the advice of his disciples because of the death of his friend Lazarus, knowing full well that the authorities who had sought his life would be laying in wait for him. The village of Ephraim was 18 miles north of Jerusalem on the main highway north to Samaria and then to Galilee. It was off the highway to the east, where the terrain falls down to the Jordan Valley and has been planted over centuries with orchards that supply Jerusalem. In the winters, these orchards were deserted, making them a perfect hideout. Jesus would have arrived sometime late in January or early February and would have stayed there for several weeks until returning to Bethany the week prior to the Passover. The retreat at Ephraim had allowed him to control the timing of his confrontation with the authorities, and he must have used this period of solitude to clarify his own sense of what was going to happen. Trying to imagine what was going through Jesus' mind during this time is difficult and fraught with problem, save for two things. First, it is important to validate the claim that he was in every way like us. This is the teaching of the author of the Epistle to the Hebrews, and is also the hard-won orthodoxy of the Ecumenical Council, Chalcedon being the chief among them. Another aid for us is to honor the role the book of Psalms played in Jesus' mind. It seems that his dying breath was exhaled through the words of Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The Psalms were the lingua franca of his age. In our media-glutted world and our capacity of instantaneously referencing things, what is there left to memorize, and why would someone do it? But in Jesus' world, memorizing text was commonplace, and the Psalms were among the most available. Jesus' thoughts would have been filled with insights and the cadences of the Psalter. Here then is my attempt to imagine his thoughts as he considered how he might respond to the accusation of his accusers. The poem takes off with the interlude that describes how a day might have been passed and might have been rewarded with the sight of an almond tree in bloom. Almond trees do bloom in February in Israel, and they are eye-catching sights as the blossoms pop before the leaves do. The word almond tree in Hebrew shakad, has the meaning of watching, and it is the source of a famous pun made by the prophet Jeremiah. Following the interlude is a reflection on what kind of defense Jesus should be preparing for his inevitable arrest. The poem is entitled, Why I Will Not Speak. The interlude. The watcher bloomed. He had spent the day with one of the 12 in the orchard following the pruners whose hooks expertly brought down the superfluous branches of this tree so that their fruit might be full and in reach. And as they did with dispatch every day, the dormant season. He with his companions had gathered the fallen limbs and stacked them neatly in the far corner of the field, where they could be retrieved at a later, less demanding time for use in the homes of the caretakers, and with their leave to take to the widow in whose farm they were staying, a small but welcome help to both. And for him and his companion, the stooping and bending had felt good. It dispelled the chill and the drag of a winter day, substituting for a while the physical endeavor for the mental one that stood for him at the heart of this retreat. Until the pruners, for lack of light, had gone early to their rest, and he and his companion each bound great bundles of wood, and putting them across their backs, made their way to the widow's cottage. Upon crossing the hedge that separated the orchard from the road, they saw the watcher, among the bare wood, covered in blushed pinks. A smile came across his face, and he asked his companion, "What do you see?" "I see the branches of an almond tree." His companion, in on the game, replied with glee, "And well you have seen." And then he had said, "My father has just spoken." "What?" inquired the companion, surprised at the turn the conversation had taken. "He has just said to us, has he not? I am watching over my word to perform it." Continuing now with the meditation, the reflection, why I will not speak. As he continued to walk from the field to the widow's cottage, and then to the cave which served as their shelter for the length of their stay, where they would indeed lay down the burden of the day, he mused to himself. The watcher had indeed seen it, but no one else had yet seen the movement in the dead wood. He had seen it and announced it. A tree of bare wood would bloom. It would be done as God had willed it, and yet there would be a trial, or trials, or the pretense of trials. Should he not now somehow be preparing his defense? But the real trial had already happened, and the trials to come would be about how a certain cabal of priests and their learned advisors would regard themselves in their aftermath, and would be regarded by those who followed them, about how a certain governor and his court would feel about themselves and what their peers would come to say about what they had done that day. If with his words he could confuse or divide the court, could cajole or convince his judges to act against their will, it would yield a temporary victory doing nothing, except confirming the way of the world and making no change, and no kingdom would come. In the end, it was them that needed his words. They would use his words to justify himself, whatever his words he spoke to them in his defense. They would twist and spin into admissions of guilt. And whatever words he spoke against them, they would spin and twist into self-evident treason. The only thing that they could not twist or spin would be his silence. Only his silence would force them to own what they were doing, and only his silence would raise among them the sense of guilt, even if for a moment, which might in itself be a victory, a beneficent gift to the kingdom to come. Clearly, this was a frail hope, but it was important to hold any hope in the world. I will not speak, he resolved. As a result of his reasoning, he came to be thinking of a psalm which they had sung together the other night. It struck him at the time that he remembered that the memorist who was leading them was showing off a bit by taking them to such an unfamiliar psalm. The words began, I will keep a watch upon my way so that I do not offend with my tongue. And then the psalm had come to the line, I will put a muzzle on my mouth while the wicked man is before me. It was those particular words, I will put a muzzle on my mouth while the wicked man is before me, that had caught his attention. And since then, those words had been tumbling around in his head, and he had been wondering why, but now they had come home to support his resolve that whatever the trial, he would not speak. The psalm which is quoted is Psalm 39, verse 1. It provides the words for Jesus to express and confirm his sense of how he should deal with the coming confrontation. It followed the similar language in Psalm 38, verse 13. But I am like the deaf who do not hear, like those who are mute and do not open their mouths. I have become like one who does not hear, and from whose mouth comes no defense. This strategy infuriated the high priest, and it puzzled Pilate. For us, it might suggest that there is an economy of silence for us who are living in what seems to be more and more an accusatorial society. Be that as it may, it certainly has value for us, at least I think for myself I find it, to have a way of helping us feel closer to the Christ as he lives through his passion. And it is a source of hope that our own meaning cannot be stripped from us, even by death. When First Thursday returns in May, it will be Easter week, and we shall have a look at what On Giving My Word has to say about the resurrection.